take a deep, deliberate breath and let go of any exam anxiety you might be holding on to. Settle into your focus zone. Welcome to this deep focus explainer for the Cambridge AS Level Afrikaans syllabus, specifically paper 8679. Today, we are taking a highly structured, serene approach to deconstructing the paper 2 essay component. We're going to dive deep into the thematic cluster of human relationships, family, the generation gap, and young people. But listen carefully. We aren't just going to look at what to write. Anyone can memorize a list of facts. Instead, we are going to look at exactly how to construct your arguments. We are going to completely eliminate that panicked feeling of staring at a blank page by replacing it with absolute, calming structural clarity. By the end of the session, you'll know precisely what the Cambridge examiners are truly looking for and how to deliver it to them perfectly, every single time.
I want you to anchor yourself to this number right now, 15%. That is a truly massive yield for a single component. This specific essay topic, when it appears on your paper, accounts for approximately 15% of your total paper 2 marks. Now, I know a lot of students look at a number like that and immediately feel a wave of panic. You get that sudden, overwhelming urge to try and memorize entire dictionaries of vocabulary, right? I want you to completely let go of that instinct right now. Take a breath and realize that this 15% is absolutely not a test of how much you can blindly remember under pressure. It is a reward for structural discipline. Think of it as a mathematical certainty that we can secure simply by applying the correct, methodical formula to your page. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Here is our minimalist, deliberate roadmap for today's session. We'll start with the 15% value, move into core essay principles, decode the method mark strategy, build a critical evaluation framework, and finish by turning top examiner warnings into your ultimate defense.
Let's start with section 1, the 15% value. Securing these crucial mocks requires a complete mindset shift away from rote memorization. Memorization is fragile, isn't it? It completely shatters the second you encounter an unfamiliar, high-tariff question prompt. Structural understanding, on the other hand, is absolutely bulletproof. To secure this 15%, we must treat the language exam not as a creative writing exercise, but as a deliberate architectural project. Systematic analysis over memorized facts is your foundation. Think about the zen of decoding command words. When we calmly peel back the filler words in a complex prompt, what are we left with? We are left with the exact assessment objectives demanded by the Cambridge examiners. Those command words like analyze or evaluate are not mere suggestions. They are incredibly strict parameters. Analyze literally means taking the generation gap apart, piece by single piece, to see exactly how its internal gears turn. Evaluate means taking a step back, judging the societal impact of that gap, and assigning a specific value to it based purely on objective evidence. Calmly decoding these words is your ultimate shield. It protects you from rambling off topic, and, crucially, it protects you from running out of time.
Moving on to section 2, core essay principles.
This concept right here perfectly illustrates the central tension in essay writing, analytical depth versus superficial breadth. I want you to imagine 2 different scholars sitting down to write this paper. Let's call them Alex and Sam. Now, Alex is incredibly eager, but tends to crowd the page with unstructured facts. Alex writes with superficial breadth, desperately listing every single thing they know about human relationships and the youth of today, social media trends, curfews, peer pressure, academic stress, without ever stopping to explain why any of it actually matters. It's such a common trope because it gives the illusion of knowledge, showing the examiner you have a great memory, but it completely fails to show a strong analytical mind. Now consider Sam. Sam is precise. Sam knows that analytical depth, which is exactly what the mark scheme actively rewards, means choosing far fewer points, but diving incredibly deep into them. Instead of a scattered list, Sam takes just one concept, like familial academic stress, and calmly traces its cultural roots, its direct psychological impact on the teenager, and its continuous ripple effect on the entire household dynamic. Remember this, depth always wins over breadth. So, how do we practically achieve that elite level of depth? It comes down to 3 deliberate actions. First, provide precise definitions. Before you even begin to argue about the generation gap, you must explicitly define what that gap actually consists of in a modern real-world context. Lay the groundwork. Second, establish clear causal relationships. Don't just make a blank statement that young people feel isolated. Calmly explain the precise root cause and the subsequent measurable effect. And third, integrate cross-topic connections. The syllabus clearly emphasizes that top-performing candidates exhibit conceptual understanding by transferring knowledge. So if you were writing a paragraph about changing family dynamics, explicitly draw a line connecting it to broader technological shifts or modern educational pressures. When you map out your textbook definitions step by step and create these seamless logical links across the syllabus, the examiner immediately recognizes a scholar operating at total mastery. Let's look at Section 3, the method mark strategy. This is where we decode the hidden architecture of the exam. In many Cambridge assessments, method marks are awarded strictly for following the correct process, regardless of whether your final, subjective conclusion perfectly aligns with the examiner's personal worldview. You are essentially proving, visually and structurally, that you know exactly how to construct an academic response. Think about how tragic it is when a candidate writes a brilliantly insightful point about youth rebellion, but completely forgets to format it within clear academic parameters, losing absolutely crucial marks in the process. You must be deeply intentional about your presentation. You must use proper headings where applicable, maintain appropriate formatting, and utilize correct formal Afrikaans terminology for your concepts, completely avoiding casual colloquial slang. Ensure your layout is clean, legible, and highly logical. Every single time you correctly deploy an academic convention, you are quietly, systematically banking method marks. It's pure structural compliance. To build a flawless, high-scoring paragraph without breaking your focus, you need to rely on a deliberate, three-step data interpretation flow. Let's call this our marks per minute flow formula. Step 1. Extract the core information. Perform a mindful scan of the prompt. What is the raw data or the foundational text actually saying about the generation gap? Step 2. Interpret the relationships. Take that extracted piece of data and look at how it interacts with the other definitions we've already laid out. Step 3. Draw evidence-based conclusions. A top-band candidate perfectly fits the mark scheme parameters by naturally extracting a social trend, calmly interpreting its impact on family life, and concluding with a rock-solid, justified statement. It is a highly effective, incredibly rhythmic process. Extract, interpret, conclude. Once you lock into this rhythm, the essay practically writes itself. Section 4, Critical Evaluation Framework. Okay, let's take a brief, intentional pause here. Let's just breathe and refocus your mind. Before we map out our final top-band paragraph structure, I want to make sure your daily study dashboard is complete. Subscribe to Ace the Exams at the handle @AceTheExams right now and enable all notification alerts. Whether your target is an IGCSE, an O-level, or an AS and A-level A-star, this channel is your dedicated weekly space for completely stress-free exam mastery. All right, let's get back into the flow. Imagine you hit a structural roadblock mid-paragraph. Your evidence suddenly drops out of alignment and your argument starts feeling weak. Don't panic. We simply apply this systematic three-step loop to restore perfect balance. 1. Deconstruct the given information. Break the prompt back down into its absolute smallest logical steps. 2. Solve the problem systematically. This is where you deploy a visual framework like the Peel structure: point, evidence, explanation, link. 3. Evaluate the reasonableness and justify. Ask yourself, is the conclusion you are drawing actually logical? Does your final link smoothly connect right back to the core prompt? By walking through this deconstruct, solve, evaluate loop, you take a moment of potential anxiety and transform it into a moment of deliberate, structural repair. We really need to talk about what true evaluative thinking looks like, because this is exactly what unlocks the absolute highest grade bands. It requires you to go far beyond simply presenting facts. First, you must calmly identify the limitations in the data. For instance, if you are discussing a statistic about young people's digital communication habits, you need to point out what that statistic fundamentally doesn't show. Second, you have to question the underlying assumptions of the prompt itself. Third, consider alternative interpretations. How might a grandparent view this exact same cultural scenario differently than a teenager? And finally, always justify your decisions with rock-solid, irrefutable evidence. Remember, evaluation is not about having a loud, strong personal opinion. It is about proving to the examiner that you have examined the issue from a complete 360-degree angle, recognized its deep complexity, and forged a highly logical path through it. This brings us to a wonderfully subtle yet critical nuance: identifying similarities versus identifying differences. Comparative analysis is just a massive part of discussing human relationships. When comparing generations, weaker candidates will almost always exclusively look for differences. They focus only on the obvious surface-level conflicts. But strong, elite candidates, they identify both the obvious differences and the hidden underlying similarities. They used precise comparative connectives in their Afrikaans phrasing to perfectly balance these points, carefully judging the relative importance of each.
Because yes, while the technology used by parents and their children is fundamentally different, the core biological human need for validation, love, and connection remains an incredibly powerful similarity. Holding those two opposing thoughts in your mind simultaneously and structuring them with total clarity on the page is the absolute hallmark of a top-tier candidate.
And finally, Section 5, Top Examiner Warnings. Let's intentionally turn negative data, the actual documented mistakes pulled straight from Cambridge principal examiner reports, into our ultimate impenetrable defense strategies. I want you to really look at this direct quote from the principal examiner. Candidates consistently confuse key terminology, always define terms before using them in extended responses. This is a massive flashing alert. If you are writing an extended response deeply analyzing the generation gap, but you haven't taken the time in your very first paragraph to explicitly define what exact parameters you are placing around terms like youth and older generation within the specific context of your essay, you are essentially building a house on sand. The examiner is literally handing you the key here, warning you, map out your precise textbook definitions before you ever launch into your complex arguments. It anchors your entire essay in pure academic rigor. Let's run a quick mental challenge. Imagine I put a flawed student paragraph right in front of you. Your job is to identify the exact sentence where structural discipline breaks down. Generally, it happens at one of these top 3 roadblocks where candidates lose focus. Number 1, confusing cause and effect. If a student writes that social media completely causes bad family relationships, rather than calmly analyzing if pre-existing, fractured relationships actually drive youth to isolate themselves on social media, their argument completely lacks critical nuance. Number 2, forgetting to check format and presentation. Those method marks we discussed earlier, they are so often just thrown away in a panicked rush. And number 3, writing answers that are not specific to the given context. If the prompt specifically asks you to analyze rural family dynamics, and you write a beautifully pre-memorized essay about urban youth culture, you score a 0 for relevance. It doesn't matter how flawless your Afrikaans vocabulary is, you must stay rigorously, completely aligned to the parameters of the prompt. To seamlessly lock in all these principles and completely bypass exam anxiety, I highly recommend utilizing a tactical memory hack. Create a simple mnemonic device using the first letters of the key structural terms we've discussed today. For example, think of DCC, which stands for definitions, causes, context, or whatever string of letters naturally works for your unique brain. The moment the exam begins, take a breath and calmly write that mnemonic at the very top margin of your planning page. It acts as a powerful visual anchor. When you feel the time pressure rising and your focus starts to drift, you just look back at that simple code. It instantly reminds you of your systematic recipe. Calmly decode the question, flow with your structural formula, and execute your final analytical polish. By deeply mastering this structured, methodical approach, that 15% of your grade is absolutely no longer a gamble. It becomes a guarantee. We have completely distilled this exam strategy down to its absolute core, focus-driven components, ensuring that your structural logic will always outpace your stress. But as you sit down to prepare your next practice essay on family dynamics and the generation gap, I want you to ask yourself this one provocative question. Are you simply memorizing the superficial differences between parents and teens? Or are you actually fully equipped to critically evaluate the much deeper, complex societal shifts that created those differences in the very first place? Dive into your next set of past papers with that exact analytical lens, and I absolutely guarantee your structural performance will transform. Subscribe to AC Exams at the handle at @ACExams, click that notification bell for our future focus deployments, and drop a comment below right now telling us the specific subject, tier, and target grade you are currently meditating on. Keep questioning the framework. Keep your focus absolute, and I will see you in the next explainer.